Hello, everyone, and good evening from Brampton, Ontario, in Canada. So I'm Dr. Minhas from Punjabi Kids Health, and welcome so much to tonight's IG Live. We have a really wonderful guest who's going to be joining us soon, Josh Kunkun, who is an amazing young man who is going to be talking to us about learning differences, about neurodiversity, and about different ways to fight stigma and to understand some of these conditions a bit more as well. So we are going to just give everybody a minute just to make their way into the room. Great, and I think Josh might be here as well. Perfect. There you are. Hi, Josh. Can you see me?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect. Here, I'm
Perfect.
just going to fix my camera just for a second. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to turn up my volume. There we go. And so we'll give everybody a moment just to get logged in. But I was just saying to everyone, that we're really excited to have you here,
Very excited.
talking about your experiences. And so over the next, I guess, half hour or 40 minutes or so, we're going to talk a little bit about learning differences, neurodiversity, stigma, and all of these things. So I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so
If
much for having me. Yeah,
My pleasure. And so maybe maybe we can just dive into our conversation if that's
sounds
okay
great.
with you.
Yeah.
So I was starting to introduce you a little bit, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey so far.
So as you guys know, my name is Josh, but my journey started when I was in, I think, about end of grade four, beginning of grade five, when I first got diagnosed with learning differences and like things like ADHD. So what I have is I have ADHD dysgraphia, and that was like really hard for me, and that's kind of where my journey started. So as a young kid in grade five, it was really scary for me to go through the school year with this because I felt a whole lot of stigma about it. I felt like insecure with my own self because I didn't want to leave the room for tests. I didn't want to go into a separate space and have peers constantly ask me, like, oh, where are you going? Why does Josh get to do this? That was really hard for me as a young kid. And that kind of progressed all the way until grade seven, end of grade seven, beginning of grade eight, where I really felt comfortable with my learning differences, where I really felt comfortable with my ADHD. And I kind of looked at it as a gift less than a deficit to me. And I feel that's where like my mindset shifted. And I felt a lot better. And I was a lot more positive towards the ADHD and the learning differences. But like that's kind of been my journey, kind of grade five and six and seven, figuring things out with ADHD and like dysgraphia, dyslexia, all of that. And like kind of going through a school system, which wasn't really the best fit for it. But figuring out as I got on, and then once I got to high school, everything kind of clicked. And I was feeling a lot more comfortable with who I was, with what I had. And I looked at it as more as a gift, more as a good thing for me. Like now I'm very happy that like with my ADHD, I don't get tired like ever. So I can run forever. It's really good with like sports like basketball and soccer, which are two things that I like really enjoy. And like for kids with ADHD or kids with like learning disabilities, they may have a deficit in focus for things they find like boring or tedious, but they hyper focus for things they really love. And for me, some of those things are like sports. Those are like my big passion. So I love it that I'm able to just hyper focus on these things that I love to do. And it makes me like really good at it. It makes me quick on my feet. So that's kind of like my journey to where I am today. So yeah,
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
of
That's,
course.
it's really helpful. And what grade are you in now?
I'm in grade 11. Yeah.
Grade 11. And so, it's been a few years of this. You've been in high school now as well. And so you mentioned a couple of, parts to your learning profile there. Could you talk, so you talked about dysgraphia, you talked about some ADHD as well. Are you able to talk a little bit more about how each of those, what they mean to each of you, what each of them mean to you in your life right now?
Yeah. So I think dysgraphia is just kind of like very messy handwriting, and that's one that's kind of stuck with me since I was like a little boy. Because I remember when I was very young, I think in grade one, I was doing a writing assignment as like a journal of the day, and my handwriting was just like atrocious. It was illegible. It was ridiculous. And my mom was just like, "Oh, Josh, why do you have such messy handwriting? Like, why don't you try a bit harder?" Because she didn't understand, and like no one really did. But like that's kind of where dysgraphia has had like that such a big impact on my life. Because even now, when I handwrite, it's like it's really hard to read. It's impossible, and I feel that one has a bit more deficit than it does gift, but it also does have a lot of gift because I can get a lot of ideas out quickly, and it's kind of like a neat thing where I'm the only one who's able to read my own writing, and that's something that I find pretty cool. I have dysgraphia, ADHD, and forms of dyslexia. So with my ADHD, that one is kind of more to me, I see it now fully as a gift, as something like that I've been blessed with because it's something that makes me feel awesome. Like I'm happy all the time. I'm very energetic all the time. I have a lot of energy constantly, which is just because of my ADHD. I'm able to do things over and over, and I'm able to find like things that other people may find like super boring, super interesting. And I'm able to find like positivity and good in those things because I have so much energy to really dissect it. So I get really excited for those kinds of things. So like that's where I feel that one has been a really huge gift to me. And it's kind of like now looking back, it's helped me in so many ways and it's helped me be like the person I am today. And with dyslexia, it was kind of new to me. It's something that like I was diagnosed with like in the last 2 years. So I'm kind of just navigating my way around that because I didn't know I had it. I have like some forms of it. I don't know which ones, but I'm just still trying to figure it out. So I think they're all cute, really big gifts to me, and they make me like the unique person that I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's such a, I think an appropriate way to look at it is, all of our brains work in different ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's really important to look at, your profile in terms of what comes easily, what might be a bit harder, but then at the same time, like you're saying, what are the gifts or what are the superpowers that come with that as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and so it's nice to hear you talk about how, this manifests in the sports that you play and your ability to focus on the things that are really interesting for you, which is great.
Hmm.
Um, and when you talk about, challenges with your writing, for example, um, related to that, then are there any special supports that have been put into place to help with that, or how does that work in terms of life in high school?
I think for high school, I've been very lucky to have a really, really good resource team at the school who all support me through like everything. And like even with my IEP, my learning support plan, I have things like accommodations where I can get like a scribe on tests. I can get extra time, more space for my very messy handwriting. But I think one thing that's really helped me a lot is the teachers in my school who are all very supportive, who understand, who've like had or who have some of these learning disabilities and understand like how it's hard. So I think that's one thing that's like really helped me get through high school or like work through navigate high school is just the amazing support plan of my teachers who all like understand it. They know what's wrong. They know what's happening. So also with my accommodation of a scribe, I feel that is also really important to me. It really helps me in like support my writing because I'm a very spoken person. I don't really like to handwrite or I don't really like to type or write or anything. I like to kind of just talk things through, kind of work
Mhm.
things out. And like with that, I'm able to just talk to the person, have a conversation, and they kind of write down my thoughts. So I feel that really, really helps me in school and kind of work through high school as I like keep going.
And and what was that like? So, in terms of that process, and I'm sure it'll be different for people that are watching,
Yeah.
it'll be different in different school boards and different schools or different parts of the world even. But when it comes to trying to figure out what's helpful for your learning, um, who are the people that have a say in that? So is it teachers? Is it you and your family, or a little bit of everybody? What's your experience been with that?
I think it's kind of it's mainly for my journey, but everyone's journey is different. But for mine, I feel like what really helped me was knowing how I learn and also a little bit on how like my parents thought I learned. My parents thought what my learning style was, and my teachers. So I feel it's kind of like a big group effort in helping support your learning disabilities or something like that. And I feel from when I how I discovered my learning style is I like to listen and then write things down. I didn't know that. I thought I was just, oh, I can hear it once and then it's done. I realized like once I hear things, and that's like what my mom really helped me with. She made me realize like, Joe, just slow down, write things down. That really helped me and find like what my learning style is and what helps me best when I study. So I feel it's a group effort, right? It's like it takes a village to raise a kid, that type of thing.
Yeah, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of, in terms of some of those accommodations you were talking about, so maybe I'll just mention for people that are watching, usually when we're thinking about how to help learners, we think about two different types of strategies. So one might be an accommodation, which is similar to what you were talking about. So accommodations are usually, do we need, to change the way in which the student is taught or tested or evaluated? So could it be that, we need a quiet space to be able to focus, maybe using a device or, typing or using voice to text, having more time to work on things or bigger space, like you were saying as well. So those are accommodations. And then the other piece often we think about is modifications, which may be things along the line of, do we change the level of teaching that we're doing in evaluation? So is it that we're just doing it at a different grade level, either higher or lower as well? So both of those sorts of things can exist. And so I was going to ask you, Josh, in terms of technology, is that something that's a part of your learning plan, or is it something that you use to help with your learning style?
I feel technology has a lot of ups and downs for me because one of like the downsides of technology is for me as a kid with ADHD, I get easily distracted. And I'm always like going down the rabbit hole of the internet or looking at like basketball scores or football scores or like the night before. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when I'm studying, it's very hard for me to start. And I feel that's where technology is kind of like my downfall because I just procrastinate and I keep getting distracted. And I keep wanting to look at something new and like find something different. But it also has amazing gifts. It's something that's like really helped me in English class or even like writing when I was in grade 6, trying to figure out like why my handwriting was so bad. Even typing, typing really saved me. I learned how to type really well, and I felt like I can get my ideas down normally without like having no one being able to read it, and like people could finally understand what was going on inside my mind. Or even like things on the computer, such as like dragon dictation, which is basically like speech to text. So you kind of speak into the computer, and the computer just picks it up and like puts it down on paper, and you can go make edits. That I feel has been really beneficial to me. And like in terms of technology, that's where I feel like technology is a great thing to support kids with like learning disabilities or IEPs and things like that. I feel it's a great support if used correctly.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that's, I mean, I would agree from my standpoint as well, both as a dad and also as a doctor, and working with the patients that I work with as well, where I think there are some pros and cons, and so it's important for families to think about that. But I liked what you said there about, being able to use some of that technology. If your brain is working super fast and you've got these great ideas, is it sometimes helpful to use technology to get those ideas down somewhere in case your hands are slowing you down or something, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds great. Um, and in terms of going back to this term around stigma, and so I know you do a lot of work with the Stigma Free Society. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about what does stigma mean to you, and how has it been a part of your journey? And if you want to comment about the Stigma Free Society as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, so just basically what I do for the Stigma Free Society and what like the kind of the Stigma Free Society does in general is they go into schools and raise awareness about different things on stigma or like how different things are stigmatized. And each person, one thing I love about it is each person in the Stigma Free Society who goes in and does all these talks has their own journey, has their own story, and they're all very interesting in how they face hardships in life. And one of my favorite things is just sitting in on the meetings and just listening to everyone's story and listening to what like everyone's been through. So I feel that's something like that I find super cool and I love working for them. And like what really stigma means to me is I faced stigma throughout my life, kind of with having learning disabilities and ADHD when I was younger. And that was really hard for me, especially for like a young kid. So I feel like there was this time in grade 5 when I was writing like a socials test and the teacher like pulled me aside and was like, just go and write it in my office as like kind of my separate setting. And I did not want to go. Everyone was just looking at me and they're like, oh, why does Josh get extra benefits? Why does he get to go sit in like
Mm,
an extra room? And that was for me like, well, that was really hard for me. I did not feel comfortable. And I was just like, no, 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 I don't want to go. I want to like stay here. I want to feel like I'm normal. Even though now looking back, writing that test in a separate room was normal. That is normal. Normal is each and every one of you has like your own normal. It's different for everyone. So I think that's where stigma has really like affected me. And it's like there's been many instances, like in grade 6, I was writing like a science project, and my teacher was like, Josh, you put no pride in your work, even though like I worked really hard on it. And that's just kind of like one of the things you can't control. That's just ignorance basically, but it's fine. So that's what like kind of how stigma has affected me. And like moving from that, you have to like stay positive and like be happy about it. Well, not really be happy about it, but just stay positive and work through it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that. So when you talk about some of those strategies, right? And so when you go through those tough times where, some of either what people are saying or what you think people are feeling is getting to you, what are some strategies that you use or that you would recommend other people use just to think a little bit about, what's the reality here, or how do I get myself past this tough situation?
One strategy that has like really worked for me, or like strategies, is positivity and gratitude. I feel those two are like the most amazing things, and like no one really talks about them as much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or even like positivity could be used at any positivity and gratitude could be used at any time, and I use them at every time, every chance I get. If I'm having like a bad school day or like a slow school day, or I'm just like kind of feeling down, I always think about like what's grateful in my life. Oh, I have a very nice house to live in. I have very loving, caring parents, and I have very loving and caring siblings. Even that alone just puts a smile on your face. It makes you feel better. And also another strategy is look at like the small positive things, or look at like the positive side, like the glass half full kind of approach, no matter what the situation. And I feel that's what's kind of really helped me progress through my journey. And like it keeps me happy like almost all the time. So just looking at things in like a positive light, or if like you're in a really bad situation that you're not really having fun with, try to find little things that make you happy, or little things that bring you joy, or things that even you find funny. Because I feel personally like laughter is the best medicine. It just completely brings out your mood.
And and I'm going to ask you a little bit about your friends as well, if that's okay. Around,
Yeah.
with this journey, how have your friends been a part of this? And I'm going to ask you afterwards, maybe about family as well. Um, but in terms of your relationship with your friends and the sorts of people you're friends with, how has that impacted this journey and some of these thoughts around stigma and kind of understanding yourself?
I feel right when I was diagnosed with these like learning differences and like ADHD, I wasn't very open about it. I didn't really tell my friends. But then one thing that like really helped me was they are my biggest support right now, because all of them, they understand, and like after like long conversations with them, they kind of get like what's going on and like how that was for me. And I remember in grade 5, one of my closest friends asked me, he was like, Josh, I'm not trying to like be mean or anything, but why do you get to write your test in like the separate room?
Mm-hmm.
And like from that point on, I felt very comfortable about it. I was like, he asked me, like he wasn't trying to be mean, he was just curious, he was trying to learn. And I feel ever since that moment, I've been a lot more comfortable with in just telling my friend group about like my learning differences and my ADHD. And I feel like even now we can make jokes about it and we can like laugh about it. And I feel like it's really good. So they've definitely, like all of my closest friends have definitely been like my biggest support in this journey.
Awesome. And that's a great way to own it, right? Is really to
Yeah.
kind of be honest if that works for you, and also, to I think, especially with your friends, if they're truly your friends, right? I think that's nice to be able to be honest and to be able to be forthcoming around that in terms of what works for you and your relationships there. And thinking about your parents as well, how have you what has that been like in terms of this journey as well? And now you're in high school, but I'm thinking as well, like kind of along the journey from early days on to now, what has that relationship been like, in terms of your parents and helping, their understanding or their work alongside you around your learning differences?
I think my parents have been like unbelievable, and it's just truly amazing because I would not be able to do this without them at all. So when I was first diagnosed, my mom and dad didn't really understand, and like no one really understood in my family, because it was kind of like a whole new thing for them. It was like really big, for me and for them as well. But as like growing up through school, and I was telling them about like the things I was dealing with at school with my accommodations and how like I thought it was hard, they were my biggest support. They were always there to tell me like, Josh, it's okay. It's normal. Like this is normal for you. It may not be normal for them. And just
Yeah.
try to like tune other people out, or try not to listen to them, and kind of feel comfortable with who you are. And I feel like as I grew older, even now, like navigating like learning differences and stuff, my mom knows all about it. If I ask her a question, she can tell me. And that just makes me feel a whole lot better that I have a strong support system behind me to work through this. Or if I'm like confused or curious about anything, I can always ask. And now, like, I think after my diagnosis, they got my sister diagnosed with some stuff, and like my mom too herself got a psych ed. And so it was kind of like a cool thing that my family could go through and like figure try to navigate together. So I feel
Yeah.
that made me feel a lot more comfortable in like working through it as well.
Yeah, and that's so important. I think,
Yeah, for sure.
I'll often talk about with my patients as well is, what a diagnosis doesn't change who you are, but it changes the understanding of who you are, right? It helps you understand a little bit more about, like I was saying, those strengths, what comes naturally, what needs a little bit of support as well. And you mentioned there a psych ed, so maybe I'll explain that that's short form for a psychoeducational assessment, where usually that's done by a psychologist, where they would take a look at, usually over multiple days, your thinking skills, your reasoning skills, your memory, all of those sorts of things in different areas of how you function and how your brain functions as well. And so sometimes that's what, or oftentimes that's what individuals would go through to understand a little bit more about their learning profile or their learning differences. Um, and so usually I would say, I think the youngest that I often will see individuals get that done is usually around grade 3, but sometimes earlier, right? If there's a need as well. So I see you nodding there. Was that around when you had gone through this process?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like when my parents picked up on it and they started talking about like getting a psych ed, and I think I got like my official diagnosis into grade 4, beginning of grade 5.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And along this whole journey so far, what would you say has been the most valuable lesson that you've learned, either big picture or about yourself?
I think the most valuable lesson I kind of learned, can I do both?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think for myself is to just stay positive and like keep on moving. Because I think without that lesson has kept me going through almost like everything. And just to stay happy and stay positive and be grateful for what you have. And I feel like that's such an important lesson that not enough people use. And I feel that's just like been great for me. It's been what's keeping me going. It just keeps me happy all the time. And I feel for big picture, it's kind of along the same lines of like staying happy and staying positive, but it's kind of in the sense of like gratitude and be grateful for what you have and be grateful for who you are and to be comfortable with yourself and like be comfortable in your own normal and not let the like what other people say, what other people think like affect you in that way. So I think that's those are like the two really big lessons I've learned.
That's such great perspective and so mature. So yeah, thank you so much. I think a lot of grown-ups should keep those words in mind as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm going to ask you also, who would you consider to be your biggest champion or your biggest hero, when if you were to think about it?
Um, that's a good question actually. I think who I would choose to be like my biggest champion or biggest hero is my dadima,
Mm-hmm.
because I've grown up with her my whole life and she kind of practically like raised me and she's been a part of my life forever, which is just I find crazy. And to think about all the hardships she's had to deal with moving from India, sorry, to Canada, I find that like crazy. I find that like an insurmountable challenge. You leave all your family, all your friends back home, and you immigrate to a whole new country, Canada, and deal with like a whole new set of problems. And you start from basically like zero. You start from nothing. And I think that was just crazy to me, and like everything she's had to go through, everything she's had to deal with, her passion, her struggle, and like every morning I see her, I wake up and she's always has a huge smile on her face, just how making breakfast. And I think that just really makes my day. So for sure, my Dodima is like my biggest champion and hero, and like I always look up to her. I love her so much. It's just
That's fantastic. That's so nice. And I think, yeah, that probably resonates or probably feels similar for a lot of people who are listening or watching as well. In terms of the role, what we learn from our grandparents and everything that they've been through as well,
yeah.
and the motivation that that gives. And I feel that positivity in you as well, similar to what you're saying about your
It's
dad.
just really crazy to think about that they left everything behind, like their home, like a sense of security to try to like start a better life for their kids and their grandkids. So I think that takes a lot of courage. That's why
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. And
super
so
cool.
great that when you talk about that gratitude, I think that's an important thing to think about as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, about that. Um, and so, if you were to think about specific pieces of advice that you would give, so let's start with it for parents who are listening. Um, what is there anything in particular that, like, one piece of advice that you would want parents, particularly Punjabi parents, to know?
I think particularly for Punjabi parents to know is to try to understand your kids like as best as you can. Because I feel when I was first starting out in this like learning differences kind of situation, my mom and dad they didn't really understand what was going on. And I remember one instance, I think it was in grade five, I was sitting in the living room trying to write an English assignment. And like me and my mom were kind of just button heads of it. And and then we kind of got into a bit of a yelling match and like she was like, Josh, you need to try. I'm like, I am, but she didn't see that. And I think the best thing is to communicate, talk to your children, try to understand what's going on in their life, try to understand what's hard for them. Because that's where I feel in like the Punjabi community, especially, that's where the biggest deficit is, and in like communication or like trying to make your kids feel comfortable talking about problems that they may face every day. That, so I feel communication and talking to your kids is like a huge piece of advice for Punjabi parents to know. Because I'm like now my mom, my dad, and I have great communication. We talk about almost everything. So now I feel that's how I feel. Like Punjabi parents, like that's the biggest piece of advice is talk to your kids, understand how they're feeling, understand what might be hard for them, and then that way it's best for both of you.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's so important for us always to keep in mind, especially day to day.
Yeah,
It can get really tough for parents. You've got a busy household. Often balancing between running your household or work and whatnot. So I think it's so important to be able to take time for those conversations and to understand, as well. And I think the other piece is, parents often, we want our kids to do well. So I think that's sometimes where that frustration might come from when
exactly.
when
Yeah,
when parents are also hitting a bit of a wall. And I think it's important to remember that often kids are feeling that as well. And so being able to join forces rather than butting heads, like you were saying, which is so
yeah,
common, as well. So being able to team up for that is so important as well. And I think that's part of why if there is a specific diagnosis, being able to give it a name, right? So you're kind of teaming up against whatever that challenge is, as
yeah,
opposed to one another as well, as can be really
exactly.
important.
Yeah.
And going back to that advice as well, I know we often will have a lot of educators or teachers who watch as well. If you had a specific piece of advice that you'd want to give to teachers, is there anything that you'd want to add?
I feel, yeah. So I feel like teachers are like, again, super important in a young kid's life because all like the one person they'll see every day, well, most days, other than their parents, is their teacher. And I feel having a great teacher can completely change the mindset of a young kid or even like any kid on school. Because I used to hate school, but then I had like a really good teacher. And then I would enjoy going to class every day. I would enjoy seeing them. I would enjoy sitting in the lesson. So if like you're a teacher and you know a kid is struggling or has been like newly diagnosed with an IEP, I think the best way to do that is to help them. Try to make them feel supported. Try to make them feel like accepted. Because that was really hard for me as well. Because I didn't feel like I was accepted in the classroom. I would feel like, oh, I'd have to always go to the resource room to write my assignments and things like that. So I feel the biggest thing the teachers can do for kids with or like new kids with IEPs is to support them, help them, make them feel like they're doing okay, make them feel like they are as smart as everyone. Because I know it's really scary once you first get diagnosed with an IEP or learning differences or anything really. You feel like you're not good enough, or you feel like you're not the same as everyone else, even though you are and you're fit in. So I think that's like a huge piece of advice I would give to teachers is to support them no matter what, and try to just make the lesson fun and engaging. Because I feel that's what helps me, or that's what helps kids the most in school is going to a fun class. No one wants to sit through a really boring class. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. I think, for all of the grown-ups in the lives of children and
especially
youth, yeah, it's really important to think about that and not get hung up on the name of a specific diagnosis, but really a lot of that. And as someone who often gives diagnoses, I think a lot of that is exactly that. Is the point of it is to help understand that there's differences, not necessarily anybody being better or worse, right? And so how do we help to battle that stigma? How do we help to make sure that everybody is able to maximize on their potential, and to be able to move forward together as a team, which is so key.
yeah.
Um, you know what? I think that was it in terms of questions that I specifically had. Was there anything else that you had wanted to mention before we wrap up for today?
No, nothing in particular.
Okay, okay. You know what? Then because I believe you're going to go show off some of your superpowers now at
Oh
your
yeah.
game or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll pause there, but thank you
I
again
have
for.
actually, sorry, one thing.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
One thing that is super important that I would like to share kind of with everyone is take care of your mental health, take care of yourself, because that is one of the most important things for everyone is yourself and your brain care. So I think getting exercise every day, sleeping 10 hours is super important. I know like sleep is not one thing that like people do as much or sleep for as long. And I feel it's like we need to pick back up on it because it's super important. 10 hours of sleep can make or break your day and stay outside as well. Enjoy nature. Like right now, a lot of people really hate, like in Vancouver here, it's very rainy and like thunderous. A lot of people hate that weather. I, for one, love the weather. I love the rain. It's just the best thing. And also, like, get a good amount of play, have fun, enjoy your time, stay positive, and also making sure you have that downtime, meditation, reading, things like that, or just lying in your bed and looking at the ceiling. I know it's always fun.
And related to that, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question before we do go. But the mental health, especially for children and youth, we've been talking a lot, around how COVID has impacted that, and especially with schools being closed and open and closed. Um, you know, um, do you want to talk a little bit about what your experience was from a learning standpoint, and also any tips for learning and mental health, really, for anybody who's watching as well?
Yeah, so I think COVID kind of hit everyone like a truck. It was really hard, especially for people. Like for me, I found COVID very hard because it took away the one thing that I enjoyed the most, which was playing, going outside and playing
Mhm.
sports.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that kept me happy and one thing that kept me going was talking to people and like always having conversation. I was always on the phone with friends or family, just trying to make others laugh and like make others feel like they were supported. And I think that's what really helped me when people did that for me or like when I did that for them. So mainly just staying positive, do what you can in your community to help your community because we're all in this together. Everyone's going through the exact same thing. And it is hard for everyone. So I feel, yeah, just making sure you stay positive and not get like too down on yourself or not get too down on the situation. Try to find the best of what you have and look at the good and like all the little things in life.
Yeah, oh, that's great advice. And I think, it's like you were saying during the pandemic, it's been really tough,
Yeah,
especially for those of us that enjoy physical activities, like you were saying, being around our peers, being around other people as well. So I think especially those things that you mentioned, so around getting enough sleep, getting some physical activity, eating well, taking some time to connect with the people around you is so important. And for our youngest ones, for the younger children out there, to make sure that parents, grandparents, even older siblings are helping to set a good example. That it was so
yeah,
important as well.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, maybe we will pause there then. But again, thank you so much for the gift of your time and for
Well,
sharing
thank you
your
so much for
journey
having me.
so generously. So I really appreciate that. Thank you again, Josh. So to anybody who's watching and joined us late, we'll be posting this to our IGTV, so you can watch this afterwards in its entirety. But we'll pause there for today. Josh, thanks again so much.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to share and making it feel like a safe space. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. All right, take good care.
You too.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.